I chose Shadow Pine Forest because people who go in don't always come back out. That felt like exactly the kind of place I needed. I was wrong about what was waiting in there. I thought the worst thing that could happen was dying alone in the dark. I didn't know something ancient was already crouched in the trees above me that first night, watching me sleep, fighting a war with itself over what I was. I didn't know it lost that war, and I didn't know that by the time the sun rose, I was already his, wearing a claim I hadn't agreed to, couldn't see, and wouldn't understand until everything fell apart. This is the story of what happened when I found out. Chapter 1. The Forest That Didn't Push Me Out. The plan was simple. Disappear. Not the dramatic kind of disappearing that requires a note or a reason, the quiet kind. The kind where you drain your savings account at a machine that has no camera, pack one bag with only what you can carry without your arms aching, and drive until the gas gauge kisses empty somewhere so far from anything familiar that even your own name starts to feel like it belongs to a stranger. I had been planning it for 4 months. I want to be clear about something right away, because the story gets complicated later, and I need you to understand who I was before it did. I was not fragile. I was not running from a person. I was not a woman who needed saving. I was a woman who had spent 28 years feeling like she was living someone else's life, in someone else's skin, in a world that never quite fit around her the way it seemed to fit around everyone else. And I had finally decided to stop pretending otherwise. I left on a Tuesday. Nobody noticed until Thursday. The forest was not an accident. I had researched it. Shadow Pine, 11,000 acres of old-growth wilderness in a part of the state that the highway system seemed to have deliberately avoided. The nearest town was a place called Haller Creek, population 400 and dropping, 30 miles from the forest's eastern edge. There were warnings on 3 different hiking websites. Compasses behave strangely. People get turned around. A ranger station that had been closed since 2019. I read all of that and thought, perfect. I parked my car at the end of a fire road that hadn't seen maintenance in years and walked in just after noon on a Wednesday in late October. The trees swallowed me within minutes, not metaphorically. One moment I could see the car over my shoulder. The next, there was nothing behind me but timber and shadow, and the kind of silence that has weight to it. I should have been afraid. I wasn't. That should have been my first clue that something about me and this forest already understood each other. I made camp before dark, which I was proud of. A clearing I found almost by instinct, following something I couldn't name. Not a sound, not a smell exactly, more like a pull, the way your tongue finds a sore tooth without meaning to. The clearing was circular, old trees on every side, their roots breaking the surface of the ground in patterns that looked almost deliberate. In the center, a ring of stones that someone had arranged long ago, blackened in the middle from fires that predated me by decades at least. I built my fire inside the ring. It caught immediately, which surprised me because the wood was damp from 2 days of rain. I ate. I read by firelight until my eyes burned, and sometime around midnight, I let the fire die down and zipped myself into my sleeping bag and looked up through the gap in the canopy at a sky full of cold stars. I felt something then. Not danger. Something older than danger. The feeling you get in a place that has been waiting. I told myself it was the isolation, the unfamiliar sounds, the natural strangeness of genuine wilderness for someone who had spent too long in cities. I fell asleep. When I woke up, the fire was burning, not smoldering, not the last gasp of an ember I'd missed. Burning, fresh wood fed and crackling, throwing heat across the clearing in a steady, confident way that a fire only does when someone has recently tended it. I sat up so fast I knocked over my water bottle. There was no one in the clearing. I checked my watch. 4 in the morning. I had been asleep for 4 hours. I looked at the fire for a long time. Then I looked at the tree line on every side. Nothing moved. The forest was absolutely still in the way that forests sometimes go still when they are holding their breath. My heart was hammering, but my hands were steady. I will give myself that. I got up, checked the perimeter of the clearing. Found nothing. No footprints in the soft ground at the clearing's edge. though the ground was soft enough that there should have been if anyone had walked in to feed my fire. I stood there in the dark for a long time, trying to be rational about it. Then I looked down at my left wrist. I don't know why I looked there specifically. I just did, the way you sometimes touch your face when you have the feeling something is different about it. My wrist was bare, the way it always was. I didn't wear jewelry, hadn't since I was a teenager. Except, there was a marking on the inside of my wrist, just below my pulse point, dark, like old ink or a bruise that had settled into a pattern rather than spreading randomly. It was roughly the size of a thumbprint, and it looked deliberately shaped, almost like a sigil, almost like a language. I stood in the firelight staring at it for a full minute. Then I did the rational thing. I told myself it was a bruise. I'd slept on my arm oddly. I'd pressed it against something in the night. I was in the woods alone, and I was letting the strangeness of the place get into my head. I went back to my sleeping bag. I did not sleep again. By morning, the marking was darker. I studied it in daylight. It was not a bruise. Bruises have irregular edges, gradients of yellow and purple, the shapeless evidence of broken vessels. This was clean-edged and deliberate, 3 curved lines that crossed at a center point in a way that reminded me simultaneously of a compass rose, and something I had seen once in a book about old European mythology that I'd picked up at a used bookstore and never finished. I photographed it with my phone, even though I had no signal to send it anywhere. Then I packed up my camp, buried my fire, and told myself I was going to hike east and think about leaving. I did not leave. I don't know how to explain that adequately except to say that the forest didn't feel dangerous. It felt expectant. And there is a particular kind of person, I know now that I am one of them, who cannot walk away from something that is waiting for them, even when every sensible instinct says they should. I made a new camp, same clearing. I don't know why I went back to it. My feet found it. The fire I built that second evening burned hotter than the wood warranted. And just before I fell asleep, in that thin, dissolving edge between waking and not, I heard something in the trees above me. Not a branch settling, not a bird, something breathing, something large and patient and absolutely still. I opened my eyes, looked up into the canopy where the branches crossed against a half-moon sky. 2 points of light looked back at me. Gold, steady, not reflecting the fire, generating their own light from somewhere deeper than reflection goes. I stared. They stared back. And then, I cannot explain this, and I have stopped trying, I stopped being afraid. Completely. Like a switch had been found and thrown. My heart slowed. My muscles released tension I hadn't known I was holding. I fell asleep looking up at those golden eyes. When I woke, they were gone. But the fire was burning again. And on the ground beside my sleeping bag, placed with a neatness that made my stomach turn over, was a single stem of something I didn't recognize. Small white flowers, delicate as breath, that smelled like pine resin, and something warmer underneath, something almost human. I picked it up. My marked wrist pulsed once, warm, like a second heartbeat. I sat with that flower in my hand for a long time in the early morning silence of Shadow Pine Forest, and I thought, something here knows me. The thought should have sent me running. Instead, I put the flower in the front pocket of my jacket, closest to my chest, and started making breakfast. 3 days later, I would learn his name. 3 days after that, I would learn what he had done. And everything, absolutely everything, would become something I had no framework for. But that morning, in the quiet of a forest that had been waiting for me, I sat by my impossible fire and felt, for the first time in 28 years, that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I just didn't know yet what that was going to cost us both. Chapter 2. The Man Who Already Knows Her Name. He didn't appear dramatically. That was the first thing that surprised me. No rustling branches, no sudden figure emerging from shadow with a warning in his eyes. One moment, I was crouching by the stream east of my clearing, refilling my water bottle, and the next moment, there was a man sitting on a fallen log 10 feet away, watching me with the calm patience of someone who had been there long before I arrived and had simply been waiting for me to notice. I stood up fast. Water sloshed over my hands. He didn't move. He was tall. I could tell even sitting down. Dark hair pushed back from his face with the carelessness of someone who had never thought much about how he looked. Strong jaw, serious eyes, the kind of stillness in his body that you only see in people who have spent a great deal of time in wild places and learned to move like they belong to them. He was wearing a dark coat, no insignia, nothing that told me anything useful. His eyes were gold, not amber, not hazel, gold, like the points of light I had seen in the canopy 2 nights running. My brain made the connection and my mouth went dry. "You stayed longer than I expected," he said. His voice was even, not threatening, not warm, observational, the way you'd comment on weather. I found my own voice faster than I thought I would. "You've been watching me." "Yes." No apology, no explanation offered, just the flat acknowledgement of someone who didn't consider deception worth the effort. I took a breath and measured the distance between us. 10 feet. The stream behind me, trees on every side. My pack was back at camp, 50 yards west, with the small knife I'd brought for utility rather than defense. "Why?" I said. He looked at me for a moment before answering, and there was something in that pause, something careful, like a man choosing words across a minefield. "You're on private land," he said finally. "This entire forest. My family has held it for 3 centuries. When someone enters, I know." "There are no signs." "There are wards," he said. "Most people feel them and turn around without understanding why. You walked through them like they weren't there." I looked at him steadily, and that's unusual. "In my experience," he said, "it's never happened before." The word never sat between us with more weight than it should have. "I'll leave," I said, because it seemed like the thing to say. "I'm not asking you to leave." "Then what are you asking?" He stood then, and I was right. He was tall, several inches over 6 feet, and he moved with the same quality the forest had, like he belonged to it, or it to him. He took 2 steps toward me and stopped, keeping a distance that was deliberate and respectful, and he looked at me the way you look at something you have been trying to solve for a long time. "I'm asking your name," he said. I almost didn't give it. Old habit, the instinct to keep something back, to give away as little as possible to strangers. But something about the directness of his gaze made the instinct feel unnecessary. "Elisa," I said, and then, because his steadiness was somehow pulling the rest of it out of me, "Elisa Payne." Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise exactly, more like confirmation, the look of a man who has heard a name he was already expecting and is still not quite ready for the reality of it. "I'm Wes," he said, and after a pause that felt like a door opening against resistance, "Wes Vincent." "Do you live out here, Wes?" "Close enough." He nodded in a direction that was neither east nor west, vaguely north. "My home is about 2 miles that way. There are others with me. We prefer the privacy of the forest to the town." "How many others?" "Enough to call it a community." His eyes dropped briefly to my left wrist. I had pushed my sleeve down that morning, a small vanity. I didn't want to look at the marking, and I didn't want questions about it. But the way his gaze went there, precise and immediate, told me that my sleeve was not the point. He already knew it was there. My pulse kicked hard. "You've seen it before?" I said, not a question. He met my eyes again and said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. "What is it?" I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. "I think," he said slowly, "that conversation requires more than a streamside introduction. Will you walk with me?" Every reasonable instinct I owned told me to say no, to pick up my pack and find my car and drive until the forest was a memory. I pushed my sleeve up and held my wrist out toward him so the marking caught the thin, gray morning light. "Tell me what this is first." He looked at it, and for just a moment, one unguarded, fleeting moment, something crossed his face that was far more complicated than I was prepared for. It was not guilt exactly. It was older than guilt. The expression of a man confronting something he did that he cannot undo and is not entirely sure he should want to. "It's a mark of claim," he said. "In my culture, He paused. "Among my people." "Your people." I kept my voice neutral. "Claim meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning protection, belonging." He looked away briefly, jaw tight. "It means that whoever carries it belongs to the one who made it, that no one else can touch them, threaten them, approach them with ill intent, without answering to you." "Yes." I lowered my wrist slowly. "And when did you decide to put it on me?" "I didn't decide." The words came out rough, like he'd been holding them back and they forced their way through. "I came to investigate a trespasser. I found you sleeping, and He stopped, tried again. "Something in me recognized you before my mind had any say in the matter. The mark happened. I could not stop it. It was already done before I understood what I was doing." The forest was very quiet around us. A bird somewhere, distant, the stream moving over stones behind me. "You marked me," I said carefully, "while I was asleep. Without asking, without my knowledge." "Yes." "And you've been watching me for 3 days without telling me." "Yes." I looked at him for a long time. He held the look without flinching, without defending himself, without offering the kind of half-reasoned justifications that people reach for when they know they've done something indefensible. He just stood there and let me see the full weight of it. That honesty was the only thing that kept me in the conversation. "Can it be removed?" I said. Something moved through his expression that he controlled quickly. "No." "Can I choose not to accept it?" He was quiet for a moment. "The mark exists regardless. What you choose is what it means. What happens next? That part," he met my eyes directly, "that part is entirely yours." I pulled my sleeve back down. 2 miles north," I said. "Your home." "Yes." "And if I walk there with you and ask you every question I have, you'll answer honestly." "I'll answer everything," he said. "I should have answered before I let 3 days pass. That was..." He exhaled slowly. "That was wrong of me. I was trying to find the right words and I ran out of time to choose them carefully." I picked up my water bottle, capped it, clipped it to my pack strap. "Then let's walk," I said. "And Wes, if I decide at any point that I want to leave, you let me leave." "Immediately," he said, without argument. I nodded once. We started walking north through Shadow Pine, the Alpha King and the woman he had marked in her sleep, both of us stepping toward a conversation that was going to change everything. Neither of us spoke for the first quarter mile. The forest watched us go. Chapter 3. He did it while I was sleeping. The house was not what I expected. I had been building a picture in my mind during the 2-mile walk. Something grand and fortress-like, the kind of structure that announces power before you're close enough to feel it. What I found instead was a house that had grown rather than been built. Stone and timber in the old style, multiple levels connected by covered walkways, everything oriented toward the forest rather than away from it. Like whoever designed it understood that the trees were not a backdrop, but a presence that deserved acknowledgement. Warm light in the windows despite the gray morning, wood smoke from 2 chimneys, the smell of coffee, which was so unexpectedly ordinary that it loosened something tight in my chest. People moved inside, shadows behind glass, several of them. "How many?" I asked again. "In the house itself, 14, Wes said. "In the wider territory, just over 300. I stopped walking. 300 people live in this forest. In and around it, some in Haller Creek, some in settlements further north. He glanced at me. "We're not hermits. We simply choose to remain separate from the broader world. There are reasons for that." "I imagine there are." We stood at the edge of what would have been a front garden if anyone had planted it formally. Instead, it was a graduated softening of forest into clearing, moss and low fern giving way to flat stone paths, everything deliberate but nothing manicured. The front door opened before we reached it. The man who stepped out was shorter than Wes by several inches, broad through the shoulders, with sandy hair and sharp eyes that went to me immediately, and stayed there with an assessment so thorough it was almost clinical. He was maybe 35 in appearance, though something about his stillness suggested that appearance and age had long since parted ways. "You brought her in," he said to Wes. Not an accusation, a statement that contained one. "Blair," Wes said, a single word that managed to carry both greeting and warning. "This is Elisa. She has questions. I'm going to answer them." Blair Holmes looked at me for another long moment. Then his eyes dropped to my wrist, the same way Wes's had at the stream, precise and knowing. "The council is going to want to be present for that conversation," he said. "The council can wait until she's had coffee, and I've said what needs saying privately first." Wes's voice was even, but the word privately had edges. "She is a guest. Treat her accordingly." Blair stepped aside. The room Wes took me to was at the back of the house, small and plainly furnished. A table, 4 chairs, a window looking out into the trees, a fireplace that someone had recently fed. It felt like a room used for difficult conversations rather than comfortable ones, which seemed honest given the circumstances. Coffee appeared within minutes, brought by a woman who introduced herself only as Renee, before disappearing without being asked. I wrapped both hands around the mug and waited. Wes sat across from me and for a moment said nothing, looking at the fire with the expression of a man assembling something he has been putting off assembling. "What are your people?" I said, because waiting felt like a waste of time. "Wolves," he said, simply, directly, with no softening. "Shapeshifters. We can move between human form and wolf form. We have lived in Shadowpine for 3 centuries, hidden from the broader human world because, as history has repeatedly demonstrated, humans and wolves in proximity tends to end badly for both." I drank my coffee. He watched me, clearly prepared for a bigger reaction. "The fire," I said. "The wards. The fact that the forest feels like it's paying attention." I set the mug down. "The eyes in the trees at night. All of that makes more sense now." "You're remarkably calm." "I'm saving my energy for the parts that matter." I pushed my sleeve up and laid my wrist on the table between us. "This part matters. Tell me everything about it. Not the version you think I can handle, the full version." He was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table, and told me. Among his kind, he explained, the mate bond was not a choice. It was recognition, a deep, cellular certainty that fired when a wolf encountered their person, their specific, irreplaceable person. It had nothing to do with knowing someone. It operated below the level of reason, below the level of preference, rooted in something older than either. When he had come to the clearing that first night, following the evidence of an intruder who had somehow walked through 3 centuries of protective magic without triggering a single ward, he had not been expecting anything except a problem to resolve. He had found me sleeping, and his wolf had known. Not suspected, not hoped, known, with the totality of something that admits no argument. The mark was an alpha's claim. In their tradition, when an alpha recognized a mate, the mark could be pressed into existence through will alone, a release of the alpha's essence, ancient and involuntary as breathing. It required no physical contact. It asked no permission. It simply happened, because for 300 years of instinct, the question of permission had never been part of the architecture. "I felt it happening," he said, and his voice had changed, stripped back to something unvarnished. "I tried to stop it. By the time I understood what was occurring, it was already—" He stopped. "Done." "And the 3 days?" "The 3 days were me trying to find a way to tell you that didn't begin with, 'I have done something to you that cannot be undone, and I need you to understand it was not intentional, but I also cannot tell you I regret it because I don't fully know yet whether I do.'" I looked at him across the table. That's exactly how it should have begun. Something in his face shifted, not quite a smile, more the shadow of one, surprised into existence against his will. "You're angry," he said, significantly. I kept my voice level. "You put a mark on my body while I was unconscious, and then watched me for 3 days without telling me. In any framework I know, that's a violation. Yes, he said, no qualification, no but, just the flat acknowledgement, and the willingness to sit inside it without reaching for an exit. And you're telling me it can't be removed? It can't. So I carry this for the rest of my life regardless of what I decide. Yes, but what it means, what it does, that is not fixed. The mark exists. The bond it represents only activates fully if you choose it. Without your choice, it's, he looked for the word, it's a door. It doesn't open unless you open it. And what's on the other side of the door? He met my eyes and answered without hesitation, everything. Connection, protection, a life I stopped believing was possible about 50 years ago. And if you choose not to open it, a marking on your wrist that causes you no harm but reminds us both, every day, of a mistake I made in the dark. The fire crackled between us. Somewhere in the house, voices moved through walls, the low current of a community going about its mourning. You're old, I said. Not an insult, an observation. 73 years as alpha of this pack, he said. Before that, 30 years growing up in it. I stopped counting the total some time ago. And in all of that time, you never found your mate. I stopped believing I would. He looked at the fire. I had begun to think the bond was something that happened to other wolves, not to me. And then a strange woman walked into your forest, and your instincts made a unilateral decision. Yes. I was quiet for a moment. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it as honestly as you've answered everything else. Go ahead. If I had been awake when you found me, if I had been sitting at my fire instead of sleeping, would it have happened the same way? He thought about it seriously, which I appreciated. He didn't reach for the comfortable answer. The recognition would have happened the same way, he said at last, but I would have had time to stop it, to choose restraint over instinct. He looked at me directly. The sleeping was not the cause of the mark. The sleeping was the reason I failed to prevent it. That distinction doesn't change the outcome, but it's the truth of it. It doesn't change the outcome, I agreed, but it matters anyway. Yes, he said, it does. I pulled my sleeve back down and picked up my coffee. I'm not leaving today, I said. His expression didn't change, but something in his stillness changed quality, like a held breath. I'm not staying because of the mark, I continued. I'm staying because I walked into this forest on purpose looking for something I couldn't name, and I'm starting to think that whatever it was might be connected to whatever is happening here. I want to understand it before I make any decisions. That's... He stopped, collected himself. That's more than fair. There's one condition. Name it. Nothing else happens to my body, my choices, or my understanding of my own situation without my knowledge and consent. Not a conversation about me without me present. Not a decision that affects me made by your counsel or your community or your instincts without me in the room. Are we clear? Wes Vincent, Alpha King of Shadowpine, looked across the table at me with something in his gold eyes that I would not identify until much later and said, completely clear. I nodded once. Then introduce me to your people, I said, and tell Blair Holmes I'll see his counsel when I'm ready, not before. The shadow of that almost smile crossed his face again. He's going to hate that, he said. Good, I said. It'll set the right tone. Chapter 4. What the Blood Remembers. Blair had gathered 7 people by the time Wes brought me into the main hall. They were seated along one side of a long table in a room that smelled of old wood and candle wax, arranged with the unconscious formality of people accustomed to making decisions together. I studied them the way I always studied rooms full of strangers, quickly, from the outside in, looking for the ones who would cause trouble and the ones who would be fair. Blair sat at the center. To his left, an elderly woman with white hair pulled severely back and eyes the color of winter sky, the kind of eyes that had been watching people for so long they had stopped being surprised by anything. To Blair's right, a heavy-set man with a trimmed gray beard who had the specific stillness of someone containing strong feelings on a short leash. I pulled out the chair directly across from Blair and sat down before anyone invited me to. Several expressions shifted around the table. I noted which ones. "Elisa Payne," Blair said, like he was reading from a document. "You already know my name," I said. "Let's skip the part where you establish authority and get to the part where you tell me what you actually want to know." The elderly woman made a sound that might have been a laugh, quickly suppressed. Blair looked at Wes, who had taken a position to my right, slightly behind me, present but not hovering, close enough to intervene if needed. "We want to understand," Blair said carefully, "how you entered this territory." I walked through wards that have turned back every uninvited human for 300 years. I didn't feel any wards. Exactly. He leaned forward. "That is precisely the problem, Miss Payne. You didn't feel them because they didn't engage, which means the forest recognized something in you that we do not yet understand. And given our history," he glanced at Wes briefly, "given what is at stake for this community, we cannot simply accept your presence on faith." "I'm not asking you to accept anything on faith," I said. "I'm asking you to talk to me like I'm a person in the room, rather than a variable in an equation." The elderly woman spoke then. Her voice was unhurried and precise, the voice of someone who had learned long ago that volume was unnecessary when clarity would do. "My name is Dorothy," she said. "I am the oldest member of this council, and I have the fewest reasons to be diplomatic, so I will simply say what the rest of them are working toward." She folded her hands on the table. "We would like to test your blood." I looked at her. "Why?" "Because the only explanation for your passage through our wards is that you carry wolf heritage, dormant perhaps, buried deep, but present enough for the forest's magic to recognize its own." She held my gaze steadily. "A blood ritual would confirm or deny it within an hour. It is not painful. It requires only a few drops and a reader with sufficient skill." "And if it confirms it?" "Then several things become considerably less complicated," Dorothy said. "And if it denies it?" The silence around the table had a quality to it, an answer that no one wanted to be the one to give. It was Wes who gave it, from behind me, his voice quiet and even. "Then we have a harder conversation about what happens next." I turned the information over carefully. Around the table, 7 wolves watched me with varying degrees of concealed anxiety. "I'll agree to the blood test," I said, "but I want Dorothy to perform it, not anyone Blair selects, and I want the results explained to me directly, not filtered through anyone's interpretation first." Dorothy nodded once, the smallest possible acknowledgement that carried complete agreement. "One more thing." I looked down the table at Blair. "Whatever the results show, no decision about what it means for me gets made without me present." I was told that condition was understood. Blair's jaw tightened slightly. He looked at Wes. "It was," Wes said. "Final. No room for negotiation." Blair nodded. "Then let's get it done," I said. Dorothy took me to a smaller room on the ground floor while the others waited. A work table, shelves of things I didn't try to catalog, the smell of something herbal and old. She moved around the space with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had performed this ritual enough times that the steps lived in her hands rather than her memory. "Hold out your left hand," she said. I did. She produced a small, clean blade and made a cut across my palm, shallow and precise. I watched my blood well up, brighter than I expected in the low light. She collected several drops in a shallow stone dish and added 2 measured drops from a vial that smelled like pine resin and rain. Then she set the dish on a small stand over a candle flame and spoke several words in a language I did not know. What happened to my blood in that dish should not have been possible. It moved. Not boiling, not reacting to the heat in any normal way. It moved with direction, the drops organizing themselves slowly into a pattern that Dorothy watched with an expression of total stillness. Then the color changed. Red first. Then, at the edges, something that was not red. something that caught the candlelight differently, shifting through amber toward gold. Dorothy was very quiet for a long moment. "Well," she said finally, "tell me." She looked up. "You have wolf blood, that part we expected." She paused. "What we did not expect is the lineage." "What lineage?" Dorothy looked at me with the expression of someone choosing between two difficult paths through the same dark wood. 300 years ago, she said, this pack was founded by two wolves, a male who became our first alpha and a female who became our first Luna. They built what this community is, established the laws, the wards, the traditions. She looked back at the dish. The female's name was Mara. She had one daughter, late in life, who left the pack under circumstances that the records describe only as necessary. She went into the human world and did not return. She lifted her eyes back to mine. "The gold in your blood," Dorothy said quietly, "is the Luna line, Mara's line. You are not simply a human who happened to carry dormant wolf genes, Elisa. You are the direct descendant of this pack's founding Luna, the bloodline everyone assumed had ended 2 centuries ago." The candle flame was steady between us. I listened to what she was saying and felt something shift beneath my ribs. Not shock exactly, more like the sensation of a picture that has been hanging slightly crooked your whole life, being straightened for the first time. "Say it plainly," I said. "You belong to this pack by blood," Dorothy said. "Not by choice, not by the mark on your wrist, not by anything Wes did or didn't do. You were born belonging here. The forest knew it before any of us did." I sat with that for a moment. "The portrait," I said, because a thought was assembling itself. "Is there a portrait in this house of Mara?" Dorothy studied me. "There is. Dark hair, about my height, a particular way of holding herself like she was always ready to move." "How do you know that?" "I don't," I said. "I just described my grandmother." Dorothy brought me back to the main hall alone. I had asked her to give me 60 seconds in the corridor first, and she had understood without being told why. I used those 60 seconds to stand very still and breathe, and accept that everything I had believed about my life, my strangeness, my restlessness, my lifelong sense of not fitting inside my own existence, had just been handed a context. Then I walked in. The room went quiet when it saw my face. I looked at Blair first. "Your ward didn't stop me because I'm not an outsider." I kept my voice level. "I'm Mara's bloodline, your founding Luna's direct descendant." The silence changed quality entirely. Blair went very still. The heavy-set man beside him made a sound. Across the room, I heard someone whisper something in that old language, and then I looked at Wes. He was watching me with an expression I had not seen on him yet. Not the careful control of a man managing a complicated situation, not the guilt of someone accounting for a mistake. Something rawer than either. Something that looked, under the gold of his eyes, very close to awe. "You knew the word," he said, "not to the room, to me. Your grandmother's word, the one you said at the stream. She used to say it when I had nightmares," I said. "She said it was a comfort word, something her mother had taught her." "It's the first word of the Luna's oath," Dorothy said from behind me, "passed down through that bloodline as a lullaby, as a way of keeping the connection alive even in sleep." The room was absolutely silent. I turned back to the council and let them sit inside what had just been revealed, let them feel the full weight of it before I spoke. "I want to understand what this means," I said. "All of it. The bloodline, the prophecy Dorothy mentioned before I came back in. Yes, I heard her say it through the wall, and no, I'm not bothered about that. And what the pack expects now that you know who I am." I looked at Blair directly. "But let me be clear about one thing before any of that conversation starts. I am not a symbol. I am not a solution to your problems, or a fulfillment of your prophecy, or a prize because of whose blood I carry." I let that land. I am a person who walked into this forest on her own 2 feet, looking for something she couldn't name. If I turn out to be connected to this place, that is something I will decide what to do with on my own terms and in my own time. The elderly woman Dorothy had a look on her face that I would come to recognize over the coming weeks, the look of someone watching something they had been waiting a very long time to see. Blair, to his credit, dipped his head. A fraction, but genuine. Wes said nothing, but when I glanced at him, his gold eyes were steady on mine, and in them was the clearest version yet of the thing I kept not quite naming. Pride. Not possession, not triumph. Pride. Like watching someone do something exactly right. I filed that away and turned back to the council. "Tell me about the prophecy," I said. "All of it, from the beginning." Chapter 5. The Thing About Prophecies. The prophecy was not written down. That was the first thing that surprised me. 3 centuries of pack history, meticulously recorded in leather-bound volumes that lined an entire wall of the library I had glimpsed on the way to the council room, and the single most significant piece of their tradition existed only in memory. Passed from elder to elder, spoken never written, because the founding Luna had believed that a prophecy committed to paper became a cage, while a prophecy carried in a living mind remained a question. Dorothy recited it from memory, standing at the head of the table while the council listened with the particular stillness of people hearing something familiar in an entirely new way. When the blood of the first returns to the sacred ground, the pack will stand at the edge of 2 fates. She will carry the old fire in new hands. What was broken she may mend. What was mended she may break. The choosing is hers. The consequence is everyone's. There is no middle path. Silence after the last line. I had been listening carefully, and I spoke before anyone else could begin interpreting it at me. "The sacred ground," I said. "The circular clearing, with the stone ring." "Yes," Dorothy said. "That's where I made my camp, both nights." "We know," Blair said. "That is part of what alarmed the council initially. The sacred ground has not been accessible to anyone outside the founding bloodline since Mara herself stood there. The wards around it are the oldest we have." He paused. "You walked straight to it." "I followed something," I said. "A pull. I thought it was instinct." "It was," Dorothy said simply. "Older instinct than you knew you had." I looked at the prophecy from several angles in my mind, the way you turn an object in your hands to understand its shape. 2 fates, I said. "What are they?" The council members exchanged glances. Blair answered, "The pack has an enemy," he said. "A hunter clan, the Dillon family. They have been systematically targeting wolf communities across this region for generations. Not out of fear, the way the old hunter stories go, but out of something more organized than that. They believe wolves represent a disruption of a natural order they have appointed themselves to protect." His voice was controlled, but I heard what was underneath it. Old anger, old grief. "They have dismantled 4 packs in the last century. Shadowpine has survived because of its wards, its concealment, and because Mara's magic runs through this land in ways that even 300 years of absence hasn't fully diminished. But that's changing," I said. Blair looked at me with the expression of someone recalibrating an assessment. "Yes, the wards are weakening, slowly but measurably. Without someone of the founding bloodline to renew them, they fail," I finished. "And then the Dillon clan finds you." "That is one fate," Dorothy said. "The pack is found. What follows depends on how strong we are when it happens." "And the other fate?" "The blood of the first returns and the wards are renewed," Dorothy said. "The pack is protected for another generation. Perhaps longer if the one who renews them is strong enough to do what Mara originally did, not just repair the magic, but deepen it." I sat with that. "You said the choosing is mine," I said. "But this doesn't feel like much of a choice. Protect the pack or don't. Mend what's broken or leave 300 people exposed." "The choice," Dorothy said quietly, "is not whether to help. The choice is what you are willing to become in order to do it. Renewing the wards requires the Luna line to be fully active, not dormant, not partial." She held my gaze. "Your wolf would need to wake." The room waited. I understood what she was saying. I had understood it since she described the gold in my blood, since the moment the picture had straightened on its crooked nail, and everything had rearranged itself into sense. I had wolf blood. My wolf had never woken. To renew what Mara had built, it would need to. Is that different from a standard awakening? I asked. Significantly. It was a new voice, a woman I hadn't heard from yet, seated at the far end of the table. She was perhaps 40 in appearance, with close-cropped dark hair and the compact, deliberate physicality of someone who had spent decades training her body to be useful. She had been watching me since I sat down, with an expression that was neither hostile nor warm, purely evaluative. My name is Nina Kaplan. I handle training and preparation for pack members undergoing their first shift. What you would face is not a standard awakening. Explain the difference, I said. A standard awakening works with dormant genes that have simply been sleeping. Yours were not sleeping. Nina's voice was precise and factual, which I appreciated. They were bound, deliberately, carefully, and with considerable skill. Someone with significant knowledge of pack magic chose to make you appear entirely human, and they did it thoroughly. My grandmother, I said, almost certainly, which means the process of waking your wolf isn't gentle activation, it's dismantling a protection that was built with love and considerable power. Your body will resist. Your wolf will resist at first because it has been conditioned for 28 years to stay dormant. She paused. The pain of a standard awakening is significant. What you would experience is worse, I said, considerably. I looked at the table for a moment. Why would my grandmother bind it? What was she protecting me from? The question dropped into the room, and the quality of the silence changed. Blair and Dorothy exchanged a look that lasted half a second too long. That, Dorothy said carefully, is connected to the second part of what we need to tell you. And it is. She paused. It is the part that changes the shape of everything else. Then tell me. Dorothy folded her hands. The Dillon clan has been searching for the Luna bloodline for 200 years. Not to destroy it, to control it. A member of the founding Luna's line, brought under their influence, would give them access to Shadowpine's wards from the inside. They would not need to break through our defenses. They would simply unlock them. The implications assembled themselves quickly and completely. My grandmother knew they were looking for me, I said. We believe so. We believe she encountered someone connected to the Dillon clan, understood the risk, and made the only choice she felt she could. Dorothy's voice was gentle. She hid you inside a human life so thoroughly that even you didn't know what you were. She sacrificed your connection to your own nature to keep you safe. I thought about my grandmother, small, fierce, precise woman who had whispered words over me in a language I didn't know and taught me to trust my instincts and died when I was 19 without ever explaining any of the things that might have made my life make sense. I had spent 9 years being quietly angry at her for the things she never said. I revised that feeling now, sitting in a room full of wolves, with her blood running gold through mine. She was trying to protect me, I said. She gave up everything to do it, Dorothy said, including, ultimately, her connection to this place. Wolves separated from their pack for long enough begin to diminish. We believe it is what killed her. The fire in the room was very steady. I breathed through the grief of that, not the grief of losing her, which was old and settled, but the new grief of understanding what she had paid. Then I put it away to examine later. There would be time. The Dillon clan, I said. Do they know I'm here? Not yet, Blair said, but our wards are weakening. When they fail enough to be detectable from outside, they'll know something changed, I said, which means there's a timeline. Yes. I looked at Nina. If I decide to wake the wolf, what would the preparation look like? A week of physical conditioning to prepare your body, Nina said. Then the binding dismantlement, which Daisy would perform. Who is Daisy? Our reader, our magic practitioner. She performed your blood analysis. Nina continued. The dismantlement takes 3 days. After recovery, you would need to learn control before we could even discuss the ward renewal. She looked at me steadily. We are talking about a month minimum, possibly 6 weeks. And if the wards fail before that? Nobody answered, which was its own answer. I looked at Wes. He had been standing at the edge of the room this entire conversation, present but silent, holding to the boundary I had set. Nothing decided without me, nothing about me decided for me. His expression was careful and still, but his eyes were on mine, and in them I could read the thing he was not saying. This is your choice. I will not push it. I have a question, I said, addressing the whole room, and I want honest answers, not diplomatic ones. Nods around the table. If I were an ordinary person with no bloodline connection and no prophecy attached to my name, just a human woman Wes brought in from the forest, would this council still be sitting here asking things of me? Or would you have sent me home? The silence lasted 3 full seconds. It was Blair, surprisingly, who answered. We would have sent you home, he said. With your memory of this place removed and your safety ensured, yes. So the reason I'm being offered a choice rather than an exit is because you need something from me. Yes, Blair said. I respected that, more than if he addressed it as something else. Then I need something from you in return, I said. Not the pack's protection, not access to whatever power this bloodline carries. Something smaller. Name it, Dorothy said. I want to know everything my grandmother knew. Everything she chose not to tell me, the full history of Mara's line, why she left, what she was protecting, what the binding cost her, all of it. Before I make any decision about waking my wolf or renewing your wards or anything else. I looked around the table. I want my own history, given to me completely, because I've been living inside a story I didn't know was mine, and I'm done with that. Dorothy looked at me for a long moment. That, she said, is the most Luna thing anyone has said in this room in 200 years. Is that a yes? That is a yes, she said. Come to the library after dinner. I will tell you everything. I nodded and stood. One more thing, I said, and looked at Blair directly. The council doesn't decide what I become. I decide what I become. If the wolf wakes, it will be because I chose it. If the wards are renewed, it will be because I chose that too. I held his gaze. Are we clear on that? Blair looked at me for a long moment. Then something in his face shifted. Not warmth exactly, but the beginning of respect. The kind that doesn't come from liking someone, but from recognizing that they are not going to be moved by pressure. Clear, he said. I left the council room. Behind me, through the closed door, I heard Dorothy say something in the old language to the room. I didn't know the words yet. I would learn them later. They translated roughly to, "She is exactly what we needed and nothing like what we expected." I would have considered that a reasonable summary. Chapter 6. What she was hidden from. Dorothy kept her word. After dinner, a meal in a dining hall loud with conversation that quieted noticeably when I entered and resumed gradually as the pack decided I was not, apparently, an immediate threat, she took me to the library and closed the door and told me everything. It took 3 hours. I will give you the shape of it here, the way I absorbed it that night, sitting across from an ancient woman in a room full of books, while the forest pressed its dark weight against the windows. Mara had not left willingly. That was the first correction to the official history, and Dorothy delivered it without softening. 200 years ago, the Dillon clan had been smaller, a single family with a single obsession, convinced that wolves were a corruption of the natural order and that someone needed to do something about it. They had learned about Shadowpine through a wolf who had been captured and had spoken under duress of things he should not have spoken of. They had learned about the wards. And they had learned, specifically, about the Luna line, that the founding female's blood was woven into Shadowpine's defenses so completely that without her descendants, the protections would eventually fail. They had not come to destroy Mara, they had come to take her daughter. The daughter was 4 years old. Her name was small and private, and Dorothy spoke it once and did not repeat it, which I understood was a courtesy extended to the dead. The Dillon clan had believed, correctly it turned out, that a child of the Luna line raised in their household, shaped by their values, loyal to their cause, would grow up to be the key they needed to open Shadowpine from the inside. Mara had understood this within hours of the first approach. She had done the only thing she could think of that would make her daughter genuinely, completely, undetectably safe. She had severed the child's connection to her own nature so thoroughly that no wolf, no reader, no hunter with a blood test would find anything supernatural in her veins. She had taken the wolf that lived in her daughter and folded it so deeply inside human DNA that it became invisible even to itself. Then she had sent her daughter into the human world with a woman she trusted, a human woman, no wolf blood, no detectable connection to Shadowpine, and she had never seen her again. She stayed, I said. Mara stayed here, knowing they would come for her instead. She stayed to protect the pack, Dorothy said, and because leaving would have meant the wards fell immediately, she chose to keep them standing for as long as she could, knowing it would cost her. She paused. The Dillon clan came twice more. Each time she drove them back. The third time, she had grown too weak from the separation to fight effectively. She died defending the eastern border. Alone. I sat with that for a moment. And the daughter? Survived. Had children of her own. The line continued, each generation more human than the last, the binding Mara placed becoming more settled, more invisible with time. Dorothy looked at me. Your grandmother was 3 generations from Mara. Enough wolf in her blood to sense things, to know things, but not enough to shift. She encountered someone connected to the Dillon clan when your mother was pregnant with you. She recognized the danger, and she did what Mara had done. She bound me, I said. She reinforced the original binding and added her own. 2 layers, which is why Nina says dismantling it will be considerable, I said. Yes. I looked at the fire for a while. The Dillon family, I said. Who leads them now? A man named Felipe Dillon, Dorothy said. 4th generation of the obsession. He is more organized than his predecessors and considerably more patient. He has been watching the edges of Shadowpine's territory for 3 years, waiting for signs of the ward deterioration. Has he found them? We believe so. Our scouts have reported sightings twice in the last 6 months. He has not approached yet, which suggests he is still gathering information. Dorothy held my gaze. Or waiting for something specific. Waiting to see if the bloodline surfaces, I said. That is our concern, yes. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the forest was dark and enormous, the trees barely visible against a sky thick with cloud. Somewhere out there, the wards Mara had built with her own life were wearing thin. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a patient man was watching for the moment they gave way. And somewhere inside me, folded so deeply I had lived 28 years without knowing it was there, a wolf was sleeping under 2 layers of a dead woman's love. Dorothy, I said, the binding my grandmother placed, was it painful for her? To do it? A pause. Profoundly. Separating a wolf from its nature is... Dorothy chose her words carefully. It is an act of tremendous violence against something that does not want to be separated. To do it to someone you love, to do it to a child, would have cost her something she never recovered. I thought about my grandmother again. The nightmares I'd had as a child that she had soothed with a word she wouldn't explain. The way she had sometimes looked at me with an expression I had always read as sadness, but now understood was grief. The specific grief of someone watching something they had taken away from you and knowing they could not give it back. She had not been keeping secrets because she didn't trust me. She had been keeping secrets because she loved me and was terrified of what would happen if those secrets found their way to the wrong ears. I turned back from the window. I want to meet Daisy, I said, the reader, before I make any decision about the binding. Of course. And I want to talk to Wes, alone, tonight, if he's willing. Dorothy studied me with her winter sky eyes. May I ask why? Because the prophecy says the choosing is mine and the consequence is everyone's, I said. And before I choose anything, I want to understand what it costs him specifically, not the pack. Him. Dorothy nodded slowly, and something in her expression suggested I had passed a test I hadn't known I was taking. Wes was in the garden when I found him, standing at the far edge of the cleared ground where the forest began, looking into the trees with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders carrying the particular set of someone thinking through something difficult. He heard me coming despite the fact that I was deliberately quiet, turned before I was close enough that a human would have noticed. "Dorothy told you everything," he said. "Yes." He nodded, turned back to the trees. I stood beside him and looked at the same darkness he was looking at. "I want to ask you something that isn't about the pack or the wards or the prophecy." "All right." "When you found me that first night," I said, "before the mark happened, in the seconds before your instincts made their decision, what did you think?" He was quiet long enough that I thought he might not answer. "I thought you looked like someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time," he said, "and that you had set it down to sleep and you looked, for that moment, like you had finally gotten some relief from it." He paused. "I thought I had never seen anything so... I thought it was the saddest and the most peaceful thing I had ever seen simultaneously." I absorbed that. "And then your instincts took over," I said. "And then my instincts took over," he agreed, "and I have been trying to find a way to apologize for it adequately ever since." "I don't want an apology," I said. He looked at me. "I want to understand what it means to you," I said. "Not what the bond is, not what the tradition says. What does it mean to you that the mark exists, honestly?" Wes was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, stripped of the careful control he wore in rooms full of people. "It means I found something I had stopped believing existed," he said, "and I found it in the worst possible way, by taking a choice from someone who deserved to have it, and I have to live with that regardless of what you decide." He looked back at the trees. "If you choose to walk away from all of this, the pack, the bond, the wolf inside you, I will ensure your safety and your freedom, both, without conditions. Even though the mark stays. Even though the mark stays." His jaw tightened slightly. "It will be difficult. My wolf will not adapt quickly to the separation, but that is my problem, not yours. You did not ask for any of this." "Neither did you," I said. He looked at me again and I saw the surprise in it, that I had offered him that. "No," he said, "but I am alpha. Managing things I didn't ask for is the primary qualification for the position." "Do you believe the prophecy?" I said. "Personally. Not what the council believes, not the tradition. You." He considered it seriously. "I believe the forest chose to let you in," he said. "I believe your bloodline is real, and the wards need what only you can give them. Whether that constitutes prophecy or simply consequence, I'm not sure the distinction matters as much as what we do about it." "And what do you think we should do about it?" "I think," he said carefully, "that I am the last person who should be telling you what to do about it." I almost smiled at that. Not quite. "The Dillon clan," I said. "Felipe, has he approached you directly?" "Once, 8 months ago. He came to the eastern border under a flag of negotiation and offered a truce. Shadowpine left alone in exchange for information about any surviving members of the Luna bloodline." Wes's voice was flat. "I told him there were none." "He didn't believe you?" "No, but he had no evidence to counter it at the time." He paused. "He will know something has changed. The wards shifted the night you walked in. Any reader worth their skill who was watching the perimeter would have felt it." "So the timeline just shortened?" "Possibly significantly, yes." I stood in the dark beside the Alpha King of Shadowpine and felt the forest behind us, immense and patient, and full of 300 people who were connected to each other in ways I was only beginning to understand. Inside me, under 2 layers of a grandmother's love and fear, something stirred. Not dramatically, not the way it would later. Just a small, quiet movement, like someone shifting in a long sleep. I put my hand over the marking on my wrist without thinking, felt the warmth of it, that second heartbeat pulse. "I'm going to wake the wolf," I said. Wes went very still beside me. "Not for the pack," I said. "Not for the prophecy, because my grandmother spent her life making herself smaller to keep me safe, and I'm done being small on her behalf." I looked at him. She did what she had to do. Now I get to do what I choose to do. There's a difference. "Yes," he said quietly, "there is. I want to meet Daisy tomorrow," I said, "and I want to start Nina's conditioning the day after." "I'll arrange it." I turned to go back inside. "Elisa." I looked back. Wes was watching me with those gold eyes steady in the dark, and his expression was the open, unguarded version, the one that didn't appear in council rooms or complicated conversations. Just the man underneath the alpha. Just someone who had waited a very long time for something and was only now beginning to believe it might be real. "Thank you," he said, "for staying." "Thank the forest," I said. "It's the one that wanted me here." But I was almost smiling when I went inside. Chapter 7. Breaking the Binding. Daisy was not what I expected. I had been building a picture from the context clues. A reader, a practitioner, someone old enough and skilled enough to have performed the blood ritual and interpreted what it showed. I had expected someone like Dorothy, measured, ancient, formal. Daisy Friedman was 30 in appearance, small and quick-moving, with bright eyes that assessed everything in a room simultaneously, and a manner that was closer to a scientist than a mystic. She met me in a workroom on the second floor the morning after my conversation with Wes, and shook my hand with a firm, dry grip before gesturing me to a chair and sitting across from me with a notebook already open. "I've been reviewing the blood analysis," she said without preamble, "and I want to be direct with you before we discuss the dismantlement." "Please," I said. "2 bindings. Your grandmother's is the outer layer. Stronger in some ways because it was placed with full knowledge of what she was doing and considerable skill. Mara's original binding is underneath, older, more settled, woven into your baseline DNA so thoroughly that your body has built itself around it." She tapped her pen against the notebook. "Dismantling the outer layer first will be painful. Your grandmother's work will resist because it was designed to protect you, and protection spells do not distinguish between the threats they were built to guard against and the person they're protecting choosing to remove them. It will read my choice to wake the wolf as a threat," I said. "Essentially, yes. Your own body will fight the process for the first day." She looked at me steadily. "After the outer binding breaks, there will be a window, several hours where only Mara's original binding remains. That layer is older and less aggressive, but it will react to what's already happening and try to compensate." She paused. "That second stage is where the real risk lives." Define risk. Your wolf has been dormant under 2 bindings for 28 years. When both layers come down, she won't emerge gradually. She'll come up fast and hard, like pressure releasing from a sealed space. Daisy held my gaze. "If your mind isn't strong enough to receive that without fragmenting, you could lose coherence, temporarily or otherwise." I sat with that word, otherwise. "Has it happened before?" I asked. "Someone losing coherence permanently during a dismantlement?" "Not a dismantlement specifically," Daisy said. "But during forced awakenings, yes. Twice in our recorded history." She did not look away from me. "I'm not telling you this to frighten you out of the decision. I'm telling you because you asked me to be direct and because you deserve the full picture." "What's the preparation that reduces the risk?" "Mental conditioning. Every evening this week with Dorothy, who is better at the consciousness anchoring work than I am. Physical conditioning with Nina to give your body the best possible chance of handling the shift when it comes." She paused. "And one other thing." "Tell me." "An anchor," she said. "Someone whose presence you can hold on to mentally during the second stage, when your human consciousness is at its most vulnerable. The wolf coming up fast will try to push your human mind aside. Having something external, someone specific, to hold to can be the difference between finding your way back and losing the thread entirely." I already knew where this was going. Wes, I said, his alpha energy creates a natural channel during awakenings, Daisy said carefully. We'd ask him to be present during the ritual and to maintain a mental connection with you throughout. Not to control the process, just to be there, a fixed point. Does he know you're suggesting this? Not yet. I wanted to ask you first. I appreciated that more than I said. Tell him, if he's willing— Yes. Daisy nodded and wrote something in her notebook. 1 week of preparation, then 3 days for the dismantlement itself. She looked up. The first day will be the hardest. The second day will be worse. The third day, if everything goes correctly, you shift for the first time. And if something goes wrong on the third day? Then we manage it together, Daisy said. I will be there for all 3 days. Dorothy will be there. Wes will be there. She closed her notebook. You won't be alone in it. I know, I said, and I meant it, which still surprised me a little. The week of preparation was its own education. Nina ran me through conditioning sessions every morning that started before dawn and ended when my body had genuinely reached its limit rather than the limit I thought I had. She was exacting and unsentimental, and occasionally almost funny in the dry, accidental way of people who have no interest in being funny. By day 3, I could feel the difference in my own body. Not strength exactly, more like a responsiveness, like the physical structure of me was being reminded of what it was built to do. In the evenings, Dorothy taught me to find what she called the center, the part of human consciousness that remains constant regardless of what surrounds it, the part that knows it is itself even when everything else is in motion. We sat across from each other in the library, and she guided me through exercises that felt strange at first, and then gradually felt like the most natural thing I had ever done. You have a very strong center, Dorothy told me on the 4th evening, with a matter-of-fact approval that meant more than effusive praise would have. Some people spend years finding it. You've been living in it your whole life without knowing that's what it was. Is that why I was calm when Wes told me about the mark? I asked. Partly, and partly because your wolf has been close to the surface for years without breaking through. You've been living with that pressure so long that genuine shock requires more than most things can provide. She looked at me with her winter sky eyes. You felt different your whole life, didn't you? Like the world was slightly misaligned with what you knew yourself to be. Yes, I said. That was the binding, Dorothy said. Not you. Never you. I held that for a moment, and then carefully put it where it belonged. Not discarded, not obsessed over, just settled into the correct place in the architecture of my understanding of myself. Wes came to the evening sessions sometimes, not to participate, to sit near the door with a book he may or may not have been reading, present in the way he had been present since the beginning, close enough to be found, distant enough to give space. We talked, most evenings, after Dorothy left. Nothing strategic, the kind of conversation that builds itself out of proximity and shared time. The history of the pack, the details of Shadowpine's territory, his memories of Mara's time that he had inherited through pack lore rather than lived experience. What the forest was like in different seasons. What it meant to run in wolf form through old-growth timber at full speed. Does it feel different from running as a human? I asked one evening. Entirely, he said. As a human, running is effort. As a wolf, running is just— He paused. It's what forward motion is supposed to feel like your body finally agrees with your intention. I've dreamed about it, I said, running on 4 legs, my whole life recurring. I know, he said. Your wolf has been dreaming through you, looking for the way out. We looked at each other across the quiet of the library, and something that had been accumulating all week shifted slightly in the air between us. Not resolved, not acted on, just acknowledged, the way you acknowledge weather coming in. You can see it, you know it's real, you don't pretend it isn't there. After this is done, I said, and the wolf is awake, and the wards are whatever they're going to be, what does the pack need from me on a daily basis, practically? The Luna's role traditionally is counsel and care, he said. "I carry the authority. The Luna carries the—" He looked for the word. "The temperature, the health of the community, whether people are well, whether conflicts are being addressed, whether the young wolves have what they need." He paused. "It sounds smaller than the alpha role. It isn't." "I'm not worried about whether it sounds small," I said. "I'm asking whether I'd be any good at it." He looked at me steadily. "You walked into a council room full of predators on your second day here and set the terms of your own engagement with a clarity that most wolves never achieve. You asked the right questions. You refused the wrong pressures. You gave Blair respect without giving him authority over you." He paused. "You'd be exceptional at it." I did not answer that directly, because the honesty of it required a moment to settle. "Get some rest," I said. "Tomorrow's the last preparation day." "Elisa." I looked back from the door. "Whatever happens in the next 3 days," he said, "you are not required to come out the other side of it as anything other than what you choose to be. If the wolf wakes and you decide this life isn't what you want—" "I know," I said. "You've told me." "I'm telling you again," he said, "because the binding breaking will feel enormous, and enormous things have a way of feeling like inevitability. They're not. You still get to choose." I looked at him for a moment. "Wes," I said, "I walked into this forest on purpose. I've been walking toward this my whole life without knowing it." I held his gaze. "I'm not going to come out the other side and walk away." I left before he could answer, but I heard him exhale. The ritual chamber was below the house, carved from the living stone of the hillside, older than the house above it. Daisy had prepared it over 2 days, symbols traced in salt and ash, candles at positions I now recognized as the cardinal anchors of pack magic, herbs I couldn't name bundled and burning in shallow dishes that filled the air with something resinous and sharp. Dorothy was there. Nina stood near the wall. Wes sat at the head of the pallet where I lay down, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence, his hand resting near mine without touching. "Ready?" Daisy asked. "Yes," I said. She began. The outer binding came apart like something that had been waiting to. My grandmother's work, precise and loving and agonizing, unraveled in waves that felt like fire running through every nerve simultaneously. I held my center, Dorothy's center, the fixed constant that knew itself, and breathed through it and did not scream, though it cost me considerably. Wes's hand closed around mine and I held on. The second binding was different, older, deeper, woven into the structure of me so fundamentally that when it broke it didn't feel like fire. It felt like a door I had been pressing against my whole life, without knowing I was pressing, suddenly giving way. And the wolf came up, fast and enormous and completely, perfectly real. She did not push me aside. She rose through me like a tide rising through rock, finding every crack, filling every space, and then settling, and in the settling I discovered that she was not separate from me at all. She was the part of me that had been folded and hidden and dreaming. She was the thing I had always almost been. The shift happened before I fully understood it was happening. One moment I was lying on the pallet in human form, holding Wes's hand. The next I was on 4 paws on the stone floor, and the world had become an entirely different place. Every sense multiplied beyond what language can adequately carry. The smell of the candles, of the stone, of Dorothy's age and Daisy's concentration, and Nina's guarded hope. And underneath all of it, Wes. Pine and deep earth and something electric that my wolf knew before the rest of me caught up. She turned toward him. He had shifted too, the great black wolf filling the far side of the chamber, gold eyes steady on mine. My wolf looked at him and felt, with a totality that required no argument, there. Not mine in the possessive sense, there in the sense of fixed point, true north, the thing the compass has always been turning toward. I held my center, held myself, inside the enormity of it. And then, with a deliberateness that Daisy would later tell Wes she had never seen in a first shift, I sat down. Not submission, not confusion, Just a wolf who knew where she was and had decided to be still for a moment and take it in. Daisy made a sound that might have been relief or wonder or both. "Welcome back," Dorothy said softly, to the wolf and the woman both. Chapter 8. The Real Trials. I spent 2 days learning to be a wolf. Not learning in the way you learn a skill, more the way you learn a language you spoke in early childhood and then forgot. The knowledge was already there. My body already understood the grammar of 4 legs and sharpened senses, and the particular intelligence of moving through forest as something that belonged to it rather than passing through it. What needed practice was the translation, getting my human intention and my wolf's instinct to agree on the same sentence at the same time. Nina was merciless and excellent. She ran me through shifting exercises, human to wolf, wolf to human, partial shifts that required holding a specific form while the rest of the body remained unchanged, until the transitions became fluid rather than effortful. She taught me to fight in wolf form with the same systematic precision she had applied to human combat, and discovered quickly that my wolf had opinions about fighting techniques that were occasionally better than the ones Nina was trying to teach her. "Stop letting your instincts override the drill," Nina said on the second afternoon, after I had abandoned her prescribed defensive sequence in favor of something faster and lower that had nonetheless worked. "My instincts were right," I said. "Your instincts were right this time," Nina said. "Instincts that override training are a liability until you understand them well enough to know when to trust them, which requires training." I conceded the point and ran the drill correctly. Blair found me after the evening session on the second day, sitting on the garden steps still catching my breath, and he sat down beside me without being invited, which I noted as a change from the formal distance he had maintained since the council meeting. "The Eastern Scouts reported in an hour ago," he said. I looked at him. "Felipe Dillon's people have moved closer to the perimeter, 3 separate sighting points, all within the last 48 hours. His voice was even, but the control in it was working hard. He knows something changed. He's positioning. "How long before he moves to approach?" "Our best estimate is days, a week at most." Blair looked at the tree line. "The ward deterioration accelerated the night of your awakening. The ritual drew on the pack's magic significantly. The outer defenses are—" He stopped. "They're thin, Elisa. Thinner than we've told the general pack population." I took that in. "You haven't told them how bad it is." "We didn't want panic." "You'll need to tell them soon," I said. "A pack that doesn't know the real shape of its danger can't prepare for it properly. That's not protection, that's control." Blair was quiet for a moment. "You sound like Wes." "Does Wes know how thin the wards are?" "Yes." "Then you both know I'm right, and you're waiting for the right moment." I looked at him. "The right moment is now, before Philippe moves, not after." Blair studied me with his sharp, assessing eyes. "The trials," he said. "Traditionally, they take place over several days, with preparation between each one. We don't have several days." "No," he paused. "The council discussed it this morning. Given the circumstances, we'd like to propose a modification." "Tell me." "The trials run consecutively," he said. "All 3 in sequence without breaks between. It's not traditional, but it's not without precedent. In times of genuine threat, the trials have been compressed before." He met my eyes. "It would be harder." "Do it," I said. The pack gathered the following morning in the large clearing north of the house. The one I had learned was used for significant ceremonies. 300 wolves in human form arranged in a loose circle, their collective presence a physical thing, a pressure in the air that my wolf registered as simultaneously welcoming and evaluating. I stood in the center with Wes beside me, and I felt the pack's attention the way I was learning to feel everything now, not just visually, but in layers, the way the forest experienced weather. Dorothy called the trials to order. The first trial was the hunt. I will not pretend it was simple. The forest north of the house was old and dense, and the prey was a large stag that had apparently learned over years of living adjacent to a wolf pack to be genuinely difficult to find and genuinely fast once found. My wolf loved every second of it, in a way that my human mind found slightly alarming. I found him by scent, circled downwind for 20 minutes with a patience that surprised me, and brought him down cleanly at the edge of a frozen stream. The whole pack would have heard the hunt through the territorial awareness that connected them, would have followed the progress of it the way you follow a story. I dragged him back to the clearing and dropped him at Dorothy's feet, and shifted back to human form in one clean movement. "First trial passed," Dorothy said. The pack did not erupt in celebration the way I might have expected. Instead, a low sound moved through them, a resonance felt more than heard. Approval expressed in the pack's oldest register. Blair stepped forward immediately. "Second trial." My opponents were announced in sequence, and the modifications the council had made to the traditional format were evident. Where the original trials involved fighting in human form first, the compressed version went straight to wolf combat, which suited me considerably better than it would have a week ago. The first opponent was a young male named Isaac, who was fast and technically precise and had the overconfidence of someone who had never lost a significant fight. I let him set the terms for the first 30 seconds, reading his patterns, and then dismantled them systematically, using the combination of Nina's training and my wolf's instinctive understanding of angles and weight. He submitted in under 2 minutes. The second opponent was harder, a woman named Karen Cabrera, senior pack member, 15 years in wolf form, who fought with an economy of movement that suggested she had long ago stopped needing to prove anything and now simply needed to win. She pushed me to the edge of what I could do, and then slightly past it, and the only reason I didn't submit was that my wolf refused the option with a stubbornness that was almost embarrassing. We reached a point 4 minutes in where we were locked, neither able to gain decisive advantage, both breathing hard, the cold morning air visible between us in clouds. Karen held my eyes across the locked position. Then, very deliberately, she released the hold and stepped back. Not submission, something else. An acknowledgement, wolf to wolf, that we had found the limit of what this particular contest could resolve, and that continuing past that limit would prove nothing worth proving. I released the hold simultaneously. The pack made that sound again, deeper this time. "Second trial passed," Dorothy said. I did not have time to feel the cost of the fight in my body before Blair announced the third opponent. Roger Hardy was the pack's strongest fighter. Dorothy had told me this the night before with the matter-of-fact honesty that was her particular gift, the same way she might tell me it was going to rain. He was not the largest wolf in the pack, but he was the most experienced combat fighter, had protected Shadowpine's borders in physical confrontations with rival wolves, and with the Dillon clan's advanced scouts over 40 years, and he moved in wolf form with the specific fluidity of someone for whom fighting had become a kind of native language. He was also, I noticed as he stepped into the circle, watching me with what looked very much like genuine respect already. Not because I had won the first 2 fights, because of how I had won them. Roger Hardy, I understood, was a man who cared about method. We faced each other. He attacked first, which I had expected, and I gave ground immediately, which I had decided on during the 30 seconds between Blair's announcement and the start of the fight. Giving ground to Roger's first push was not retreat, it was information gathering. I wanted to see his full range before I committed to anything. What I saw told me 2 things. His left shoulder carried an old injury that limited his rotation on that side by perhaps 15 degrees, and he was holding back. Not significantly, but measurably, giving me more time to read him than he needed to give me. I stopped giving ground. The fight that followed was the hardest thing I had done in wolf form. Roger was everything Dorothy had described, and his 40 years of experience meant he adapted to my adjustments faster than either of my previous opponents had. Every sequence I established, he had an answer to within 2 exchanges. But the left shoulder was real. I worked it carefully, not obviously, building a pattern that kept drifting incrementally toward his restricted side until the pattern was established enough that when I committed to it fully, the adjustment he needed to make was just beyond what the shoulder would allow. He went down on one knee. Not submission, he could have continued. But his eyes met mine, and in them was the specific look of a wolf who has been shown something that impressed them. He lowered his head. The clearing was silent for 1 full second. Then the pack howled, and the sound of 300 wolves in full-throated acknowledgement moved through the trees of shadow pine like something the forest had been waiting to say. I shifted back to human form and stood in the center of the circle, breathing hard, every muscle informing me clearly of its opinions, and felt the pack bond, the connection that had been building since the oath, since the awakening, since the first night in the sacred clearing, settle into something complete. Not finished, not resolved, but complete, the way a structure becomes complete when the last necessary piece is in place. Dorothy stepped forward. 3 trials, 3 passed. The pack acknowledges Elisa Payne as... Wait, I said. Dorothy stopped. I turned to the pack. All of them, the full circle. I want to say something before the declaration, I said. Not as a formality, because it needs to be said. The clearing was very quiet. Felipe Dillon is positioning at your eastern border, I said. The wards are thinner than most of you have been told. The timeline we are working with is days, not weeks. I heard the shift in the pack's energy, the spike of alarm, quickly controlled by those who already knew and could not be contained by those who didn't. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know the real shape of what is coming, I said. Not because I want to frighten you, because a pack that faces its danger honestly is stronger than one that faces a comfortable version of it. I looked around the circle. Mara built something here that has protected 300 people for 3 centuries. I intend to help keep it standing, but I need you all to understand what that means and to choose, clearly, whether you are with this pack when it matters. Not a single wolf moved, not a single head dropped. Good, I said, and turned back to Dorothy. Now, I said, the declaration oath was the same one Dorothy had described in the library. I spoke it clearly, every word landing in the cold morning air with the weight of something genuinely meant, and when the final word left my mouth, I felt the pack bond complete its architecture around me, 300 threads of connection settling into place simultaneously. Wes stepped forward, not to speak, just to stand beside me, the way he had been standing beside me since the beginning, present, close enough to be found. I looked at him. One more thing, I said quietly, so only he could hear. The ward renewal. When does it need to happen? Tomorrow night at the latest, he said. If Felipe is moving to approach... Tomorrow night, I said. Tell Daisy. His gold eyes were steady on mine. And after that, he said. After that, I said, we deal with Felipe. Chapter 9. Felipe. The ward renewal happened at midnight. Daisy had prepared the sacred clearing, my clearing, the one with the stone ring where I had made my first camp, over the course of the afternoon, working with a focused efficiency that left no room for conversation. Salt lines, ash markings, the same cardinal candles as the ritual chamber, but here exposed to open sky, their flames burning without wavering despite the cold wind moving through the trees. The whole pack came, not because it was required, because word had moved through the community the way important things move through connected people, not as announcement but as understanding, arriving in each person at roughly the same moment. 300 wolves standing at the tree line in silence, while Daisy and Dorothy prepared the center. Wes stood beside me at the edge of the clearing. Tell me what to do, I said. Stand in the center, Daisy said from the stone ring. The clearing will do most of the work. Mara's magic is still here, thin but present. Your blood calls to it. You just need to answer back. How? You'll know, Dorothy said, with the infuriating certainty of someone who has watched this kind of thing enough times to trust it. I walked to the center and stood inside the stone ring. The moment both feet were inside it, I felt what Dorothy meant. The clearing recognized me. There is no more precise way to say it. The ground beneath my feet, the air around me, the particular quality of the silence in that circular space, all of it shifted in the way a room shifts when someone expected finally arrives. The remnants of Mara's work, 2 centuries old and threadbare with time, reached toward me like something that had been waiting with its hand extended for a very long time. I reached back. My wolf understood this better than my human mind did, and I let her lead. Let the part of me that had been folded and hidden and dreaming finally do the thing it had been built to do. I felt the pack's magic through the bond. 300 lives connected to this place and to each other. And I drew on it the way roots draw on water, not taking but channeling, asking rather than demanding. The ground warmed beneath my feet, the candle flames rose, and then the wards rebuilt themselves, not as a dramatic visible event but as a settling, a deep structural click of something returning to the position it was always meant to occupy. I felt them extend outward through the forest in every direction, Mara's original architecture reinforced with something newer and different, my own signature woven through it alongside hers. It took perhaps 10 minutes. When it was done, I was on my knees in the stone ring, not from pain but from the simple weight of what had moved through me, and Wes was there immediately, one hand on my shoulder, steady and present. "Done?" he asked quietly. "Done," I said. Around the clearing, the pack exhaled collectively. Felipe Dillon arrived the following morning. He did not creep to the border. He walked to it openly, alone, in the thin gray light of early morning, and stood at the eastern tree line with his hands visible at his sides, in the deliberate posture of someone who wants it noted that he is making no aggressive move. Our scouts had tracked his approach for 20 minutes. By the time he reached the border, Wes and Blair and I were already there, with 6 senior pack members positioned in the trees on either side. I had asked to be present. Wes had not argued. Felipe was perhaps 50, lean and weathered, with the specific patience in his face of someone who has spent decades pursuing a single objective. He was not what I had expected. No visible weapons, no entourage, just a man standing at the edge of a forest that would not let him in, waiting. His eyes found me immediately. Not Wes, me. "You renewed them," he said. His voice was conversational, almost appreciative. "Last night, I felt it from 3 miles out." He looked at me with an assessment that was thorough and impersonal. "You must be the bloodline." "I must be," I said. "I've been looking for you for 3 years," he said. "Your grandmother hid you very well." "She did," I agreed. "She was protecting me from you." "She was protecting you from a misunderstanding," Felipe said, and his tone shifted into something that was clearly a prepared register, reasonable, measured, the voice of someone who has rehearsed this conversation many times. "My family's concern has never been with the Luna line specifically. Our concern is with unchecked supernatural influence operating outside any accountability structure. Shadowpine has functioned as a closed system for 3 centuries, answerable to no one, with access to magic that could—" "Felipe," I said. He stopped. "I've read the pack's history," I said. "I know what your family did to the 4 packs you dismantled. I know what happened to the wolves who survived those dismantlements." I held his gaze. "Don't give me the accountability speech. It demeans us both." Something shifted in his face. The prepared register dropped, replaced by something more direct and, oddly, more respectful. "You're not what I expected," he said. "Nobody ever is," I said. "Here is what I want to say to you, and I want you to listen to all of it before you respond." He waited. "Your family has been at war with wolves for 4 generations," I said. "And in that time, you have dismantled 4 packs, killed wolves who were living peacefully in concealment, and spent 3 years hunting a woman whose grandmother hid her in a human life to keep her safe from you." I paused. "That is not accountability. That is a vendetta that has outlived whatever original injury started it, maintained by inheritance rather than genuine conviction." Felipe's jaw tightened slightly. "But," I said, "I also understand that a community of 300 supernatural beings operating in complete concealment from the human world is not a stable situation indefinitely. Not because you're right about the threat, but because concealment creates its own problems. Isolation creates its own damage." I looked at him steadily. Mara chose concealment because she had no other option. I'm not Mara. What are you proposing? Felipe said carefully. Nothing today, I said. Today I'm telling you that the wards are renewed, and Shadowpine is protected, and if you send anyone past the eastern border, you will find out very quickly what a fully awakened founding Luna's bloodline can do to a ward breach. I let that land. But I'm also telling you that I am willing to have a different kind of conversation, not about accountability structures you design for us, about genuine coexistence, on terms negotiated between equals. Felipe studied me for a long moment. And if I'm not interested in that conversation, he said, then you continue doing what your family has done for 4 generations, I said, and you find out whether 4 generations of practice is enough to get through wards built by a woman who had 2 centuries of waiting behind her. I held his gaze. I don't think it is, but you're welcome to test it. The silence at the border lasted a full 30 seconds. Then Felipe Dillon did something I had not anticipated. He laughed. Brief, genuine, slightly reluctant. You have your great-great-grandmother's directness, he said. The records my family kept described Mara as someone who made you feel that every word she said was the only word that could possibly be said. He paused. I'll consider the conversation. You have 2 weeks to decide, I said. After that, I stop offering. He nodded once, turned, walked back into the human world without looking back. Blair appeared at my left shoulder the moment Felipe was out of sight. You offered him negotiation, he said. The words were neutral, but the question underneath them was not. I offered him a choice, I said, between continuing a 4-generation war that costs both sides things they can't replace and trying something that has never been tried. I turned to face him. If he chooses the war, we are better prepared for it than we have been in decades. If he chooses the conversation, we begin building something Mara spent her life trying to create. I looked at Wes. Either way, we made the right move. Wes was watching me with that expression, the open, unguarded one. She would have done exactly that, Dorothy said from behind us. I hadn't heard her approach. Mara. Exactly that. I'm not Mara, I said. No, Dorothy agreed. You're what she was trying to make possible. There's a difference. We walked back through the forest together, the senior pack members dispersing through the trees ahead of us until it was just Wes and me on the path, morning light filtering through the canopy above in the way it did at this hour, specific and golden. He'll come back, Wes said. Felipe, he'll take the 2 weeks and he'll come back. I think so too, I said. He's tired. 4 generations of the same war. There's an exhaustion in him that's older than he is. And if he doesn't? Then we deal with it, I said, together, with the full pack, the renewed wards, and the advantage of knowing exactly what he's capable of. I glanced at Wes, but he'll come back. We walked in silence for a moment. There's something I need to tell you, Wes said, about the night I found you in the clearing. I waited. When the mark happened, he said, I didn't just feel the recognition. In the moment of it, through the alpha connection to this land, I felt the wards respond. He paused. They didn't just recognize your blood, they welcomed it. Like a door that had been locked from the inside and someone finally came home with the right key. He looked at me. I should have told you that immediately. Instead of letting you believe for 3 days that you had simply wandered into the wrong forest. You let me believe it was an accident, I said. Yes. No qualification. I was afraid that if I told you the forest had been waiting for you specifically, you would feel trapped by it, destined. And I had already taken one choice from you. I didn't want to take another. I walked with that for a moment. It wouldn't have trapped me, I said finally. Knowing the forest wanted me here, that's not the same as being forced here. I still had to decide to stay. I looked at him. But I understand why you thought it might feel that way. You're being generous, he said. I'm being accurate, I said. There's a difference. He was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, are you all right? After last night? After this morning? Yes, I said. And then, because accuracy mattered, I'm tired. and I'm still adjusting to feeling the pack the way I do now. All of them, all the time, like a house full of people you can hear through the walls. I paused. It's a lot. It settles, he said, into background, like the sound of the forest. You stop hearing it as separate sounds and start hearing it as one sound. How long does that take? A few weeks, he said. Maybe less for you. We reached the edge of the garden. The house ahead was warm with morning activity, the smell of breakfast, the sound of the community beginning its day. I stopped at the garden's edge. Wes, I said. He stopped beside me. The door, I said. The one you said the bond was, that it only opens if I open it. He was very still. I'm opening it, I said. Not because of the prophecy or the wards or because I owe the pack anything. Because I have been walking toward this, toward you, toward this place, my entire life, and I am done walking toward things and stopping at the last step out of habit. I held his gaze. That's my choice, made clearly, with full information, on my own terms. Wes looked at me for a long moment, and in the gold of his eyes was everything that 300 years and 73 of them spent alone, and one impossible fortnight in the forest had built into him. Hope and relief, and a care so careful it had learned to make itself small so as not to crowd anything else out. He reached out and took my hand, not dramatically, just that. Elisa Payne, he said quietly. Wes Vincent, I said. The forest was very still around us, and the mark on my wrist, which had pulsed like a second heartbeat since the first morning I found it, went warm and steady and calm, like something that had been waiting had finally been told it could rest. Chapter 10. Full Circle. 2 years later, I went back to the clearing alone. Not because I was lost, not because I was hiding, because some mornings the best way to understand how far you have come is to stand in the place where you started and look at it with the eyes you have now instead of the ones you had then. October again, the same thin gold light through the canopy, the same cold in the air that smelled of pine resin and coming frost, the stone ring exactly as it had always been, the moss on its northern edge slightly thicker for another year of undisturbed growth. I stood inside it and felt the wards hum around me the way they always did when I was here. A recognition, warm and steady, the magic of this place acknowledging its own. 2 years. I tried to find the woman who had driven until her tank ran dry and walked into a forest to disappear, and I could find her clearly, could remember exactly the quality of her exhaustion, the specific weight of feeling like she had been living the wrong life in the wrong skin for 28 years. I could remember her without distance or condescension. She had been doing the best she could with what she knew. She just hadn't known very much yet. Felipe had come back in 11 days, 4 days inside the 2-week deadline, which I had taken as a sign of genuine interest rather than strategic positioning. The negotiations had taken 3 months. They were difficult and occasionally furious, and twice came close to collapsing entirely. Once when Blair and Felipe's representative, a sharp-minded woman named Amanda Escobar, reached an impasse over territorial disclosure that neither would move on for 2 weeks. And once when new information surfaced about the third pack the Dillon clan had dismantled, information that required everyone to sit with genuine grief and anger before the conversation could continue. But it held. What emerged was not a treaty exactly, more a framework. A set of principles for how a wolf community and the human world could exist in proximity without the concealment that had protected Shadowpine for 3 centuries, becoming the thing that eventually destroyed it. Slow disclosure, structured contact, a joint council with representation from both sides that met quarterly and handled conflicts before they became crises. It was imperfect. It required constant maintenance and occasional repair. Felipe and I disagreed regularly and productively, which was different from the 4-generation war his family had been running on inheritance and habit. Mara had spent her life trying to create the conditions for this conversation. I thought about her often. The pack had changed in 2 years, in the way living things change, not dramatically but in accumulation. New members, 2 cubs born in the spring, both healthy, both already showing the particular stubbornness that seemed to be a shadow pine characteristic. Stacy, a young woman who had attached herself to me in the early weeks with a warmth I had initially found overwhelming and now found indispensable, had taken on the role of coordinating the pack's external relations with a skill that surprised everyone except me. Blair had not become warm, but he had become something more useful than warm, genuinely fair, in the specific way of people who have examined their own biases and decided accuracy matters more than comfort. We worked well together, which neither of us had predicted. Nina still ran training sessions that started before dawn and ended when she decided they ended, and I still attended them, and she still occasionally told me my instincts were getting ahead of my discipline, and she was still occasionally right. Dorothy was teaching me the old language. Slowly, word by word, the way my grandmother had taught me its first word without knowing she was doing it. Some evenings we sat in the library for hours, and I learned the vocabulary of a history that was mine by blood, and the strangeness I had felt my whole life, that persistent sense of misalignment, continued its long, gradual dissolution into something that felt, simply, like knowing where you were. I heard him before I saw him. The specific sound of Wes moving through forest, almost silent, not quite, because he had stopped trying to be completely silent around me after I told him it made me feel monitored. He stepped into the clearing and stopped at the edge of the stone ring. "Dorothy said you'd be here," he said. "Dorothy knows everything," I said. "It's mildly alarming." He smiled, the full version, the one that had taken weeks to appear and now appeared easily, as naturally as the gold in his eyes. He crossed into the ring and stood beside me, and we looked at the clearing together in the morning light. "Same time of year," he said. "I know. Are you all right?" It was the question he had asked me more than any other over 2 years, always with the same quality of genuine wanting to know rather than social formality. I had learned to answer it accurately rather than conveniently. "Yes," I said. "I was thinking about her. The woman who came here 2 years ago." "What were you thinking about her?" "That she was braver than she knew," I said. "She walked into a forest to disappear, and instead, she found out who she was. That takes a particular kind of courage. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that keeps going even when it doesn't know what it's going toward." Wes was quiet for a moment. "She also had exceptionally good instincts about which forests to walk into." I laughed, which still surprised me sometimes. How easily it came now, how different it felt from the careful, rationed version I had managed before. He took my hand the way he always did, without announcement or ceremony, just a hand finding the hand it was looking for. The mark on my wrist was warm beneath his fingers. It was always warm now. Not the urgent, unresolved pulse of the early days, something quieter and more settled. The feeling of a question that has been answered and is now simply part of the architecture of things. "Renee told me something this morning," I said. "What did she tell you?" I had known for 4 days. I had been deciding how to say it and discovering that there was no particular way to say it except directly, which was, after all, how I said most things. "We're going to need to look at baby names," I said. The clearing was very still. I felt it move through him, through the bond, which had become as natural and constant as breathing, the wave of it, enormous and immediate and completely unguarded. Joy so total it had no shape, could not be contained in an expression or a word, simply moved through him like the ward renewal had moved through me, filling every available space. His hand tightened around mine. "Elisa," he said. "Just that." "I know," I said. He turned to face me and I turned to face him, and the morning light was gold through the canopy above us, the same light that had been falling into this clearing for 3 centuries, through Mara's time and everything after it, patient and indifferent and beautiful. "A name from the old language," I said. "Whatever we choose, something that belongs to this place." "Yes," he said, "something that carries both. Both. The human world and the wolf world. The life I had come from and the life I had found. The grandmother who had folded her love into a binding to keep me safe, and the great-great-grandmother who had built a forest into a home, and the woman I was now, standing in the clearing where it had all begun, with the wards humming around me, and the pack connected through 300 threads of belonging, and the man beside me who had made a mistake in the dark and told me the truth about it, and given me every choice, and waited. Always waited. I leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around me, and we stood inside the stone ring, while the forest did what forests do, breathed and held, and kept its long patience. "She knew," I said. "My grandmother. When she taught me that word, the first word of the oath, I looked up at the canopy. She must have known that if I ever found this place, if the binding ever came down, the word would still be there. A thread she left for me to follow home." "She loved you well," Wes said, "in the hardest possible way." "Yes," I said, "she did." We stayed in the clearing until the morning light shifted, and the cold deepened, and somewhere in the forest to the north, a wolf called out in the old way. Not a warning, just a voice checking that the world was still assembled correctly, and the forest answered back with its particular silence that meant, "Yes, still here, all is well." I called back through the pack bond, "Luna to pack," the simple acknowledgement that cost nothing and meant everything. "I hear you. I'm here." 300 lives, connected. I was the thread that ran through all of them now, the way Mara's magic ran through the wards, not controlling, not dominating, just present, just woven in. The lost woman who had driven until she ran out of road and walked into a forest to disappear had not disappeared at all. She had arrived. 1 month later, Felipe Dillon signed the framework agreement at a meeting held, at my suggestion, at the eastern border of Shadowpine, the same place his family had stood in opposition for 4 generations. Blair and Amanda Escobar witnessed it. Dorothy kept the original document. A copy went into the pack's records alongside Mara's prophecy, filed under the heading Dorothy chose herself, the middle path that wasn't.